A deal on Dickens, who could resist? A stack of Austen, warmly kissed. Golden Age crime tales twist and turn, every page a treasure to learn. Books keep coming home with me, piles so tall they're all I see. Turn a page and sail the sea, reading always feels so free.
Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. I just wanted to do feels like I have hair. Anyway, I just wanted to do a book tag video. I had seen this really fun tag from Ghost Readers in the Sky. I will be tagging him below. It was a tag created by Robert G., reader of books, who I will also tag below. And what he had written, I guess, before the tag's prompts was, a perennial topic among booktubers and readers in general is whether it's worthwhile to reread a book, or is it just a waste of time? It's a question I don't think has ever received its own proper, formal post, i.e., one with prompts. If it's already been done, no offense intended, I'm not trying to take the wind from anyone's sails. Here's my take. So this is what was written by Robert G., reader of books. So the first prompt, do you reread fiction? Why or why not? I absolutely do reread fiction. Let me try that again. I absolutely do reread fiction. I consider, once I get attached to characters, they become like friends, and so I want to visit them again and again. And I end up noticing different things about them each time, if it's a particularly good book, of course. But I feel like, in general, as you age or enter different periods of your life, you start noticing different things. When I started I'm trying to remember, it was the Terry Brooks Shannara series where you're first introduced to the Dark Uncle. I'm not sure. It's not the Sword of Shannara trilogy. It's the series after that. And I'm not sure what the name of that series is. Anyway, the first time I met the Dark Uncle's character, I was younger, like high school, college age. And so I thought, when I was reading him, he felt like a bit of an older character to me because they kept mentioning, first of all, he was called the Dark Uncle, and then they emphasized that he is older than the other characters. But when I read it again, quite a few years later, I was like, man, he's actually acting really young. He's really actually kind of immature. And when I read back over the text, it was like, oh yeah, they're not actually saying that he's a really older character. They're just saying that he's older than the other characters. He actually could be still quite young. And if I remember correctly, he is supposed to still be a youngish character. I think in his, at least in his, maybe early 30s. I got the impression with the last read in the 20s. But my point is that I had two vastly different takes on that character because I read that character when I was at different points in my life. And I'm sure that I would take something else away from that, from the reading of that character or from any of the other characters if I was to read that series again now. I know that the last time I read it, a character that I hadn't cared too much for, the first time around, I liked better. So sometimes I just think that either time is needed, space is needed. And so it's just like, yeah, I reread partially to revisit characters that I really enjoy, and then partially because every time you reread, you approach the text in a way that you can get something new out of it. Number 2, do you reread nonfiction? Why or why not? I intend to reread nonfiction. I'm not sure if I have done so much yet. I have not been reading nonfiction for fun for nearly as long as I've been reading fiction for fun. So I haven't quite built up the library of nonfiction books that I would want to reread quite yet. I have some set aside now, but I've only read them within the past couple 3 years or so. So I'm not quite at the point where I'm ready to reread them yet. Although I can definitely think of several books that I can see myself rereading in the future. Number 3, if you reread fiction, what kind of fiction are you most likely to choose? Bestsellers, classical literature, genre fiction, and the examples that are given for genre fiction are fantasy, science fiction, mysteries, romance, westerns, adventure stories. And then what are your reasons, or what is/are your reasons for the choices you've made? So, if I like any sort of fiction, I'm going to reread it. I don't read so much in the way of westerns simply because I haven't. No feeling against them. I tried a brief period of time in high school, I want to say, to read a couple Louis L'Amour's. I don't think I've really dipped much into westerns since then. I read The Virginian for school. I want to say I read Shane for school. I would like to reread Shane because I remember really enjoying that. But other than that, I just haven't read a lot of westerns. I probably should see about correcting that. Then, other than that, I don't tend to read bestsellers. Just not the kind of stuff I read. I have a few fantasies that I reread. Tolkien. I've just mentioned Terry Brooks. I don't read a ton of fantasy anymore. Just not necessarily my preference. I've been burned a couple times with reading fantasy and then coming upon sexually explicit content, which is not something I enjoy. And I'd rather reread fantasies that I know that I'm not going to, be jump scared with an unexpected explicit scene when I've gotten invested in the characters. But let's see, what else? I do have a few science fiction books I've reread. Other than your more mainstream things like the extended universe of Star Wars and Star Trek, I would say things like Terry Brooks, that's fantasy, Timothy Zahn, where I've read and reread quite a few of his. Don't really read much in the way of, unless you consider, I'm lumping Austen in with classics because that is an example they give. Yeah, I basically, a lot of what's mentioned, mysteries, I reread mysteries like crazy. My main favorite kinds to reread. So yeah, my reasons for choices I've made, if I enjoy it, I reread it because chances are those are characters that I enjoyed and I want to spend time with again. Okay, if you reread nonfiction, what kind of nonfiction are you most likely to choose? Histories, biographies, autobiographies, memoirs, philosophy, science, theology, travelogues, and what are your reasons for the choices you've made? So, like I've mentioned, I've not reread a whole ton in the way of nonfiction yet, although that I do plan to change that as I've got enough books that I've read in my history collection that I'll get to the point where I want to reread them. I haven't gotten to the point where I'm really ready to cycle through again. But I can definitely see myself rereading histories and biographies. I don't read a whole lot in the way of autobiographies, mostly because I tend to read more. That's a little too much. A lot of times, if it's an autobiography, it's a little too late for me. You might have an older autobiography. It's just not, I don't tend to read a lot of those. I don't tend to read a lot of autobiographies or memoirs. Now, I can see myself rereading a memoir like, what's it? I think it's called 64 Charing Cross Road. I could be saying it wrong. I can see myself rereading that memoir. I didn't actually realize it was a memoir when I started it, but I really enjoyed that. It's set up as a bunch of letters. It's quite well done. I don't think I could see myself rereading a whole ton of philosophy unless the topic really interests me. I can see myself potentially rereading science. That I can see myself rereading theology. Never been much in the way for travelogues. And it's, again, one of those things that if I'm interested in the topic and it grips me enough, I'll reread them. Most likely what's going to make me want to reread is if there's some personal element that I attach myself to, which is why definitely I can see myself rereading history books and biographies, because I can attach myself to certain historical figures, which ends up then being much in the same way as when I read a fictional book. I'm getting attached to characters, I'm getting connected to people, so I want to revisit with those people again. Number 5, if you've read a book which has been translated from another language, would you reread the same book in a newer or different translation? It would depend on if the translation that I have previously read is known to be faulty. If I have reason to believe that my translation is inaccurate and the newer translation is more in line with what the original author intended, then I probably would want to read the newer and different translation, just because I would prefer to get as close to possible to what the author intended for the reader to get from his work. But other than that, if there's only slight differences or it's not that big of a deal, I'll stick with what I have. But like, for example, I am glad that I picked up the books that I have for Jules Verne, because there have been bad translations of his. And I do try to research my translators before I pick up works that have been translated. Now, if, say, they were to release a new translation of The Mystery of the Yellow Room, and they would say, this is the most accurate one we have, I would probably pick that up, because there was only one translation available of The Mystery of the Yellow Room, as far as I could tell when I picked it up. So I wasn't really able to vet the translation. I don't know how accurate it is. And so if a newer, more accurate translation came out, I would be likely to pick that up. How many times would you reread the same book? How many times do you revisit your friends? How many times do you talk to your friends? If these are characters that I really enjoy, why wouldn't I reread them as many times as I want to, as many times as I feel like it? So yeah, no, I've reread books so many times, innumerable amount of times, because a lot of times also my rereads are my comfort reads. So if I'm not feeling well, I tend to reread. And that leads into number 7, what is your most recent reread? And I actually just very recently did a reread. At the end of March, I wasn't feeling well. I'd been having a bunch of just symptoms flaring. And so I was like, you know what? I always, whenever I can't focus on anything else, and whenever I just don't want to think or deal, if I just want to read and relax, I read an Agatha Christie. And so I decided to reread The Clocks, which has been a while since I've reread it. And yeah, it was really nice to revisit after, I'm sure it's been a couple of years since I've reread this. Now that might seem like a long time, but I've been reading Agatha Christie for, I think I always say over 20 years. Although I know that's, because I started, yeah, it's been over 20 years, over 25 years. So I've been reading and rereading Agatha Christie books for quite a long time. So for me to say it's been few years since I've read Clocks doesn't mean that this is a grossly underread book for me. It just means that it hasn't had its turn for a while. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed revisiting the characters, and this time around I ended up picking up, oh yeah, he referenced these different, with using Agatha Christie, in Poirot's voice, Agatha Christie referenced other books that she enjoyed. So I took note of those books, a couple of which I had read, but one of which I had not. So I ended up looking into that book, and I mentioned that in a book haul that I have yet to post. So yes, I ended up picking up something different from this book this time, and then I just enjoyed a simple read. And then I will be tagging friends below. I do intend to start another reread very soon. And in this case, the reread is because I want to have my mom experience the read with me. Also, I'm rereading this book in a different edition. So I have reread Mansfield Park at least a couple times. I'm newer relatively to Jane Austen. I'm not quite sure when I started reading Jane Austen. It's been within the past 5-10 years. I really can't give you any more of a, closer idea than that, just because I really can't remember when I started reading Austen, or even how I started to get to reading Austen. I don't even know what set me on the path. But Mansfield Park is probably the one that I've reread the least of the Austen books, but I've read this at least 3 times. And this will be my first time reading the annotated version, and this will also be my first time reading Mansfield Park with my mom, and we start tomorrow. And part of why I wanted to do the annotated version with her for that is if I can think of several points in this book where cultural context might be useful, and it'd be nice to have the opposite page of the book give me some ability to offer context I might not be able to otherwise. Things that I would have picked up, by context clues, but not really knowing in the way that Austen's audience would have known. So this is going to be a reread that I do fairly soon. And that's another reason, like I said, to reread, to get to experience someone else experiencing something for the first time, and then getting the joy of discussing that world and discussing those characters. And then because they're looking at them, I get to look at the characters in a new way and discuss them in a new way because of their experience of the characters. So, yes, I will tag some people below. Do you reread? Do you reread? Do you reread? I don't know why it seems so hard to say quickly. Do you reread? And if not, why not? All right, have a wonderful day, and I will see you again next time. God bless. Bye.
Books keep coming home with me, piles so tall they're all I see. Turn a page and sail the sea. Reading always feels so free.